Welcome back, Fourth and Long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnie Hess here, back with another off-season supporter chat. And ladies and gentlemen, I have a fascinating one here, finding himself down in Barwon Heads, Victoria. I have Justin joining me today. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Donnie. Good to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. So before we get into the footy, I like to find out just a little bit about the person that I'm chatting with outside of the game of football. So just a real quick bio about who you are outside of the game of football.
Okay, so I am a journalist and an editor for a couple of newspapers, one near here in Ocean Grove and one in Geelong. I've been a sports reporter, a television reporter, a editor and author at Lonely Planet Travel. Yeah, there's not much to me really. I grew up playing footy and cricket as sports. Only gave cricket away a couple of years ago. Yeah, lived down here in Barwon Heads, which is it's about probably an hour and a quarter from southwest of Melbourne. Nice place, very, very busy at this time of year in summer. All the tourists will probably go home on Sunday, which is good for those of us who don't rely on them. And yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I've got a wife and two daughters, a granddaughter, and yeah, that's me.
All right, fantastic. Well, let's jump into it. This is a footy podcast. So we got to find out a little bit about your connection to footy. So, what's your favorite thing about the sport of footy?
Well, I grew up with it. What's my favourite thing? I like the fast pace of the game. Although uh, recent rule changes uh, although they're trying to speed the game up, I don't think it's really worked. I like the tribalism. I like going to the footy and being part of the Richmond tribe, and I can certainly understand, appreciate the supporters of the 17 other clubs that feel the same way. I like the fact that it's relatively safe to go and sit, not like English football, which I'm a big fan of too. Um, yeah, it's a unique game. It's it's a sport that I would imagine would require quite a lot of learning if you're introduced to the game late. And I always appreciate people who try and learn it, particularly from other countries. I always appreciate people who enjoy it and make the effort to learn. So yeah, it's a good outlet on a weekend. I'm not much of a yeller or a very demonstrative person, but I can get fairly demonstrative at the footy, which I like. I enjoy that aspect of it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, we're gonna go back into the time capsule a little bit in your memory. Can you remember your earliest footballing memory?
So the first game I attended was in 1977. I remember it vividly. My dad, I grew up just on a farm outside of a city called Shepparton, which is about 100 miles north of Melbourne. And my dad took me down to see my first game. It was at Moorabbin. And for those who don't know, that was Richmond travelling to Moorabbin to play against St Kilda. Moorabbin was a very hostile venue for opposition supporters. Um, it, uh, they had an enclosure called the Animal Enclosure, which was where their hardcore supporters used to stand on the wing, and it was feral as. But as a 7-year-old, I didn't really notice too much of that. All I noticed was that I was wearing a Richmond Guernsey and I think I was wearing a beanie as well, and I got in for free. And I realised later on that that was kids wearing a Guernsey got in for free. My dad thought it was because they thought I might have been playing in the Little League at half time. But no, it was a promo thing even back then. My first memories of that game was that Richmond won. I think it was only by about 18 points or something like that. I vividly remember the smell of the footy record when I opened it, which is the program, just a freshly sort of printed paper. I remember the smells of jam donuts in the air. I remember the smells of men smoking cigars and pipes, which was a very distinct smell to me. I quite liked it. And yeah, I appreciated my dad taking me down. I don't remember too much about the game. It was a long time ago, but I know that we won, and I know that it was quite cold. And Michael Malthouse was playing for Richmond, and Dad didn't barrack for Richmond. He barracked for Essendon. He wasn't a hardcore supporter at all. And I remember him all day calling Mick Malthouse Mick Shithouse. I don't know why, because Mick was a really good player. I think he was doing it to wind me up. So yeah, they were my first memories. And then as I got a little bit older, my mum, because I got right into it, my mum started following Richmond. And we had a ritual. There was no footy on telly back then. You'd have to wait until between 6:30 and 8:30 for the replays on Saturday night, and just hope that your game was one of the three that they covered. And my mum would religiously make casseroles for dinner on Saturday afternoons. And I'd sit up on the bench with the radio, with my notepad, and would write down the goals, the scores, the quarter time scores. And Mum would listen with me and make dinners. And then as a family, we'd all sit down and watch the footy replay with our dinner. Much to my two younger sisters' disgust, they didn't get into footy at all. But yeah, they were good times. So it was good that Mum got right into it. She wasn't a football follower at all until I sort of started getting into it. Dad kept barracking for Essendon, but had a soft spot for Richmond because all the games he took me to were Richmond games. So yeah, they were my earliest memories and fond memories too. I remember one day we went down to Geelong to see a game with my uncle, who was a member at Geelong. They lived in Anglesey, which is not too far from Geelong. And my uncle was a Geelong supporter, and Geelong won quite easily that day. I think it might have been 78 or 79. And I was standing on a milk crate, and every time Geelong kicked a goal, specifically Larry Donnies, who was a full forward for Geelong back in the day, a very good player, every time he kicked a goal, my uncle would push me off the milk crate. And Larry Donnies, he kicked 7 that day, so I copped a bit of a hiding. Yeah, good times.
Awesome. So you kind of took my next question away from me, but I'm going to stay in it just a little bit. So you were a huge Richmond supporter, and as you said, your dad was an Essendon supporter, but not super. Mom wasn't really, and sisters weren't. And you said your uncle was Geelong, so it kind of sounds like your family has a little bit of everything. As you've gotten older, did you have any brothers? Did you have any other? Did your sisters ever get married? Did they ever have? Did their significant others, were they? So kind of what's the family dynamic when it comes to the footy? Because I've heard sometimes the banter amongst the family when you have multiple clubs can be fantastic.
Sorry to disappoint you, Donnie, but my two sisters never got into it. My middle sister barracked for Carlton, but wouldn't even know. My younger sister barracked for Essendon because Dad did, and they were very close. And I've been to a few Richmond Essendon games with my younger sister. She follows it, but yeah, she wouldn't be able to tell you any of the players or anything like that. So no, I sort of missed out on that sort of family dynamic, but hearing stories probably wasn't a bad thing. We're all able to remain pretty to each other.
Yeah, it's one of two things when I talk with people. It's either everybody in the family loves one club, or the family is kind of an amalgamation of multiple clubs, which is always fascinating because it's either everybody is die hard for one club or everybody kind of picks their own, and it's always a fascinating thing. So, which again, you even see it over here all the time when it comes to sports, new sports teams. So it's just fascinating to hear that. So let's go back into it a little bit. Can you remember the first Richmond item that you were ever given or bought?
I got a photo when I was, I think, 9. Although that would contradict what I said when I went when I was my first game. I'm pretty sure it was a Guernsey, like a long sleeve Richmond Guernsey. Back then, there were no sponsors labels on the middle. There was just like um, a VFL insignia
Mhm.
on the top left of the sash, and that was my first item that I was given, and I got a beanie as well. Um, and I wore the Guernsey a lot, like I wore it to school. I went to a primary school where the maximum amount of children at any one time was only 16. Most of the time around 12. Um, so we lived fairly, I wouldn't say remote, we were only 20 minutes from Shepparton, but yeah, they were the first two items. I remember one Christmas I got a drink bottle that had all the club's logos on it, which I wasn't overly keen. Yeah, those they were the first few things.
Awesome, awesome. All righty. I go to my next one because I'm fascinated again, as you kind of said, the tribalism of footy is fascinating to me. And for me, I love hearing people's stories on how they fan because I think people support or fan differently. Everybody does it a tiny bit different. Nobody is exactly the same. So I always like kind of hearing people explain it. So can you describe your fandom of Richmond for me? Are you one of those that you have to see every game? If you can't see it on the telly, you have to listen to it on the radio. You're constantly keeping track on how the team is going. Kind of what's your fandom of Richmond?
So I'm the type of person that has to go to the game in order to watch it. I can't watch it on television live. I can't listen to it on the radio live. I get this is going to sound really weird because I'm completely not in control when I'm at the game. Like what I do has no bearing on the outcome. But watching it at the game, I feel like I'm involved or invested personally. Television, I cannot watch live. I could maybe watch the first quarter, but then I just have to turn it off. And I'll check scores on my phone sporadically. I turn off all socials, all text messages. I don't know why. I just feel like because I can't see the whole ground, I can't see the play open up.
Hmm.
I, when you're at the ground and you're in a good spot, you can see things happen before they happen. And with that respect, I feel like nothing's too much of a surprise in the immediate time.
Hmm.
Whereas television, I mean, the commentators, they are absolutely horrendous. They really spoil it for me. Um, yeah, so my level of fandom, I would say I was when I was sort of in my teens and to, sort of up to about 30, I would have put it as a 10 out of 10. Nowadays, I'm still a good solid 9, but our recent success has made me mellow a little bit. Up
Hmm.
until 2017, there was just that empty void in my life. Whereas, Richmond, 2 finals appearances in, 35 years. I mean, you just can't comprehend how crap that is.
Hmm.
And then when we made the finals those 2 times, there was this promise of a new dawn. We were straight back down to you know, where we belonged. What a lot of people would say. So definitely the last 5 years or so have mellowed me. Um, it's a good feeling, but as I say to say my St Kilda mates who are probably in that position where Richmond were 5 years ago, Um, it'll be the best thing that ever happens to you when you win one. But after you do, there's that little something that's missing. It's really hard to explain. The hope of a new season. Is this going to be the year? No, not. No, we're crap. No, but it could be. It could be our year, and that's just gone now. Like, I'm at peace with the world. Although I desperately want another one. One makes you greedy for two. Two makes you greedy for three. Three makes you greedy for more. But I've certainly mellowed. And for St Kilda fans, it'll happen one day, and when it does, it'll be great. But that little something will go missing, which is a good thing. But you'll never have to feel it again.
Yeah, no, 100% makes sense. And I remember in 17 watching that final and going, the elation of the Richmond fans when that final siren off and you were premiers was fascinating again. And just the glory and the love of the song was absolutely fantastic. So I got to say this, it's one of my coolest memories sitting up. It was like 2 a.m. and I'm sitting there, and I'm a Sydney Swan supporter, and even I found myself going yellow and black during that part because it was just so cool. So I got to give you on that one. So you already answered my next question. You said that your first game you attended was in 1977, correct?
Yep, that's right.
All righty. So we'll move on to the next one. And I love this question because I get to hear a little bit of it. Do you have a favorite player of the past? And do you have a favorite player currently on the Richmond Tigers list?
So my first favourite player was a guy called Bruce Monteith. I had his number 11 on the back of my Guernsey. Bruce Monteith was from Western cut down injury. Yeah, he wasn't small. He's about 6 foot. He knew how to kick a goal. He played less than 115. He averaged more than a goal a game. And he captained our 19 Premier team. But he was injured. So that was back in the day when the interchange wasn't so big on rotations. So if you started on the bench, you were a good chance of spending at least half a game on the bench. Coaches just didn't like moving things around. No such thing as, well, there probably was such thing as fatigue, but sports science wasn't really a thing back in 1980. Bruce Monteith ended up playing in the grand final, but he was injured. He got to come on in the last minutes. By that time, we'd had them well and truly won. We won by 81 points, which I think then was a record. And he got to lift the cup up, which was fantastic. I think he retired pretty much straight away. My next favourite player, and my favourite player of all time, was Michael Roach. He was a full forward. He kicked 800 goals. He was a 6'4" athletic freak who could take a high mark. He was a beautiful kick for goal. I modelled my footy on him, even down to the kicking style. He was my mum and I would just listen to the radio, and he'd kick bags of 10 and 11. And, I'd be lucky enough to go and see him a couple of times a year. He was just amazing and a really lovely guy too. I got to meet him not that long ago, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Lovely guy. His footy suffered when Brian Taylor came into the team. Now, Brian Taylor is one of those commentators now that I don't really like. But Brian Taylor wasn't just a Collingwood full forward. He was a Richmond full forward for a few years. Unfortunately, Brian, who was a very good footballer, but he couldn't play anywhere else other than full forward. He wasn't nimble enough to go out to centre forward. Wasn't big enough to play in the ruck. So Brian Taylor was too good a player to be playing in the seconds. So he in and to play full forward. Michael Roach got pushed out to centre half forward and finished his career as a ruckman kind of hybrid sort of follower. I've never really forgiven Brian Taylor for pushing Michael Roach out because I believe he probably could have gone close to 1,000 goals. But yeah, it is what it is. Then I loved Matthew Knights, who was number 33, had his number on my back, still got a jumper with his number on my back. Matthew Knights is, he was a left footer, classy captain. Never really forgave Danny Frawley for retiring him, but Danny, rest in peace. I've forgiven that. Yeah, I don't think many Richmond supporters like the idea of him being forced to retire when I thought he still had some good footy left in him. Matthew Knights was a jet, just so good. Now Matthew Richardson, then every
I was
Richmond
waiting to
supporter
see if Richo got in there.
will probably say Richo. There was a period of probably 6 or 7 years where we would just go to the footy just to watch Richo because we knew we were crap. We knew we were likely going to lose. But he was the one constant that would keep us going to the footy just to see him. Just an absolute star. And nowadays, I'm probably a bit old to have favourite players, fanboy, but you'd have to say Dustin Martin, wouldn't you?
Or to argue that he is not not one of the best. I really hope he's back to full-fledged health this season because a top flight Dusty is one of those. He's just is so much fun to watch, and I think it hurt a little bit watching him in that elimination final because I really didn't think he was underdone, and I think Richmond they got seduced by the fact that he was coming back, and they let an underdone player come into the finals in a big game, and whether it cost them or not is still kind of up for debate. We can discuss that a little bit later. So, but let's go to it. As you said, your club has had a ton of success, three flags in the last 5 years. So I got to ask, can you pick your most memorable moment as a supporter, and is it one of those three flags?
Oh, absolutely, it is. 2017 was it was cathartic. That I was lucky enough to be able to go with 3 of my mates that I go with every week. We had pretty ordinary people right up to the 4th level, but they could have suspended me from one of the light towers in a harness for all I cared, as long as I was there. It was just to get there and experience to build up. I never thought it would happen. And then the actual day itself was when we knew we had it won with 10 minutes to go. I was in tears, just absolutely overwhelmed. It's still a blur, but I remember some mates had another guy drop off about 3 eskies full of beer cans, and we sat near the Jack Dye statue just outside Punt Road until about 10 p.m. and just soaked it all in. And then I remember walking down Swan Street where there were about 25,000 supporters. I mean, we can be pretty feral at times. I absolutely realise that Richmond supporters don't have the best reputation, but we were at our feral best that night. I just walked around and soaked it in. I wasn't jumping on cars or standing on roofs and lighting bins on fire. But that was it was just the most amazing time. 2019 was great, and 2020 didn't get to see it because it was in Brisbane. That was really weird. I'll always remember that first game that Dad took me to. I've seen a lot of good times, but far more bad times than good times over the years. But that 2017 just wiped it all from memory. It was and I think a lot of footy supporters enjoyed it for us in 2017. Unfortunately, we became, over the next 3 or 4 years, we became quite strong and quite arrogant again, which eroded a lot of that goodwill. from other supporters, which I don't make any apologies for, because we were the butt of everyone's jokes, ridicule, embarrassment for the best part of 3 decades. I do wish we probably had been a little bit more humble after 2017, but I can understand why we weren't. Yeah, the way it is.
Well, the biggest thing that I say for most is that you built a brand that I think everybody was like, oh my gosh, because it was so uniquely you that I think for many people, I don't know if it was animosity, but it was almost jealousy, because we couldn't believe that you went from a Damian Hardwick in 2016. I mean, there was talk of him being sacked. I mean, for the longest time. And then you come in 2017, and it wasn't the rip roaring 12-0 start to the season like some have been, but you just kept getting better and better. And then you hit finals, and it was like you just blossomed. And I think it's the one thing that I thoroughly enjoyed the 2017 finals, because Richmond got to show what they've been building, and they showed what they could do. Do I think that some Richmond supporters took it a little overboard? I think it's the same way with all supporters. I think Demons fans even kind of ran into it this last year, that they got a little bit big headed. Look at some of the crowds this year for some of the Demons fans. They didn't go to the games as much, and you were like, well, you've got this great team. You start off the season 11 or 10-0. You're like, why are you not at the stadium? So you can kind of understand that you break that ground and you get that rush of positive momentum. But I've always respected Richmond because they've stayed true to themselves. Yes, everybody's got dickheads in their fan base, so I take nothing personal. In fact, many times I respect the Richmond fan base because they're very honest about how they feel about it. So you have no disrespect coming from me as a Swan supporter this year. In fact, like I said, I 100% agree with you. Seeing the Doggies win in 16, even over the Swans, and then you guys winning in 17, and then Melbourne winning in 20, Melbourne winning in 21. I'm like, this is awesome. 3 clubs that had had such long droughts all end their droughts. You love it for their fan bases. So,
I think,
so,
I think what 2017 did, the fact that we came from 13th to first, gave a lot of
mm,
other teams hope that it can
oh yeah.
happen. I mean, you look at Collingwood last year, 13th to
Hmm.
within a point of a grand final. And I think they would have put up a much better show. Sorry, than the Swannies. I was barracking for Sydney, being so close to Geelong. Yeah, um, I think they would have probably put up a better fight than the Swans. Um, yeah, and I think our game style, that chaotic
Hmm.
press, go forward at all times, attack the ball carrier. As supporters, we could go along to games knowing that, well, we might not win, but they're going to actually have a crack. And I
Hmm.
think that's what, deep down, that's what every supporter just wants. You just want to see them have a crack. If they
Hmm.
lose and the opposition's too good on the day, hey, well done,
You tip
you
the cap. Yep.
outplayed us. But as long as they have a go, that's all you want as a supporter.
Yep. You just don't want that flat come out and have absolutely no energy performance like a few teams unfortunately have had. So 100% agree with you. All right. So we'll go to it. My next we'll go to current day. This last season is up. Richmond, you make the finals, but you fall just a little bit short to Brisbane in that elimination final, which again, that was an exhilarating game. I was watching it up here in during work and just could not keep my eyes from it. It was an absolutely amazing game. Didn't go Richmond's way. So I ask, what are your thoughts on this last season? You make the finals, you fall just a little bit short, but it is one of those where you kind of look at it and you go, you made the finals when Dusty had injuries and wasn't always his best. So your thoughts kind of this on this last season.
I think that Brisbane final summed up our season. It was just a case of, what if, lots of what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
We lost, I think, after round 4, the our highest losing margin was something like 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
We'd lost so many close games. Um, yeah, maybe we were unlucky in some. The Gold Coast game where we led by 7 goals. That's not unlucky. That's just bad footy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anyone. The Geelong game where we lost by 4 points, where Henry took a mark and kicked a goal late. I won't go too much on Tom Stewart knocking Dion Prestia out because I have a lot of Geelong mates. yeah, it was. And then you look at Collingwood, how they won so many close games.
Mhm.
A lot of people call that lucky. That's not luck. That's that's knowing how to win when you have to. The amount of times they came back from 4 goals down to pinch the game, um, and they're really well coached by McRae, who I had a lot of time for when he was at Richmond. Um, yeah, it was a horrible season to watch. It really was. That Fremantle game where we had a draw. Cumberland played on after taking that mark after the siren. I think we only won one of the close ones, and that was against Brisbane at the MCG when we were um, 8 goals down at one stage. Um, yeah, look, all clubs have injuries. We had our fair share. Um, it, it was a really frustrating season, and I was there at the Gabba final. Cost me an arm and a leg to fly up there and stay. And it was a fantastic game of footy. It was just end to end, high scoring. I can understand. I haven't watched the replay. I've got no interest in it, but I can understand how neutrals sort of sat there and really enjoyed that game. But forgetting the Tom Lynch goal that was overturned by the Arc, just poor defending. 4 defenders on Joe Danaher in the goal square, and he managed to get his foot to it. That's just you reap what you sow, you get what you deserve. I'm hoping that those close wins, close losses from last year, can translate into some wins this year. I think if you even halve those close losses and say that we won half of them, we would have finished top 4, of which I would have given us a decent shot at, say, playing. I don't know who finished. Oh, would have been Geelong in the first final, probably a loss. But then you've got teams like Melbourne, who I think were probably travelling better than. I think Sydney would have been hard, but you never know. I think that gives us a bit of hope for this year. Last year was just one of those really horrible, frustrating seasons, and it was just weird, just a really weird season.
Yeah, just every bounce just did not go your way, especially late in there. So, all right, and I'm one of those that I keep track of the off season because again, it's very very different. You have the sign and trade period, then you have the draft, and do you keep an eye on your off season? And how happy are you if you do? Because you pick up a couple of really solid midfielders from GWS.
Oh, I think every footy follows the off season. Sometimes even more fanatically than the season itself. Particularly, uh, particularly when you're sort of down the bottom of the ladder. A good off season can make all the difference. Particularly, like Richmond finishing third in 2016, picking up Dion Prestia, Tom Lynch the year after. I definitely follow it. I follow all the clubs, all the trades. Our trade period was fantastic. Taranto and Hopper are both class players. Both should be in their prime at 25 years old. Their injury history bothers me a little bit. They'd want to get out on the park more next year than what they did last year. But I think Taranto in particular will benefit from attending more centre bounces. And Hopper's just that hard nut. I mean, he's got some class as well, but he's just that hard nut that will add to our an area that we really lacked last year, which was contested footy and stoppages. I'm a little bit worried about their longevity, but I think they were good pickups. What it did mean was we virtually had no draft hand, and it made the draft usually really exciting because you become this draft expert, this once a year draft expert, where in the last 2 weeks before the draft, you sort of read up on all the players and you decide who you want and who you don't want. When in reality, you've got no idea whether these kids can play or not. So it meant we had 2 picks very late. So that was a little bit of a buzzkill. And we've given away our first round to GWS next year as well. So all in all, I would mark the off season as being successful at this stage, depending on whether the two Giants boys can stay on the field. If they stay on the field, that's genius by Blair Hartman.
Yeah, so that's a great transition because my next one is going into next season. I think we're getting closer and closer. We're late January, almost February. Meaning we are less than 2 months away. I think I saw somewhere on it 50 days until the first bounce of the first game. So, what are your thoughts going into next year? Because as a Richmond supporter, again, Taranto and Hopper hop in. You got to have a little bit of confidence. Your team made the finals. Yes, you had the record in close games. Do you see a bounce up? Do you think a top four is a possibility? Do you think Richmond's in the conversation for winning a flag next year?
I think we're in the conversation for sure. I think a lot of things need to go right to finish top four. Having said that, I think we are very capable of it. As I said, a lot depends on whether Taranto and Hoppo can string games together. I wouldn't want to see Tom Lynch injured for any period of time because I think Jack Rewald's this probably is his last year. We don't have a lot of key tall forwards sort of coming through. I know that the mid-season draft pick last year, Jacob Bauer, looks quite solid, but he's still a while off. So a lot of things need to go right. So if things do go wrong, I believe we could sort of be around that sort of 6th to 10th mark. But if things go right, I believe they can go really right. And I think our fixtures, it's not super hard. It's not super easy either. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can finish top four. And if you finish top four, you're every chance. I think there'll be teams that improve. I think Port Adelaide will improve and make the finals. As much as I hate to say it, I think Carlton look pretty good and will make the finals. So who drops out? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it'll be fast. It'll be fascinating. I said in one podcast, I think there's 14 teams. Honestly, looking at it the way this offseason, I think there's 14 teams that could vie for the finals this year. I think this could be one of those. I think the bottom 4 teams could make or break somebody's season if you lose a game to a bottom 4 side this year, because it is going to hammer you, because it's going to be a gauntlet. Carlton, I think, is better. Richmond is solid. Collingwood is my enigma team. I'm very fascinated. Can they continue what they did last year? Because I'm one of those, I agree with you. It's not luck, but I also think it also sets a bad habit. You can't play games against Essendon's, North Melbourne's, Hawthorns, who are in the bottom 4, and win by that. Yes, you did get some games where you beat Melbourne and you played really tough against Sydney and you won some games in the finals. But when you're playing bottom 4 sides and you're still winning with the comebacks, that makes me question, is your game style really there? Because you have to come back all the time. It's not sustainable for multiple seasons. You're going to get found out. So Collingwood is my enigma team this year. I think if there's one team I sit here and I go has a really good shot of falling out of the finals, I think it's Collingwood and maybe Sydney, because Sydney was young and it'll be a question of can they bounce back from the horrible grand final loss. I don't know. We'll have to see. I think there's so many things. And then how does Geelong back up last year? Selwood leaves. They're still relatively in more experienced side, but they're still really, really good, and they didn't lose a lot. So I'm fascinating. So this season could be absolutely bonkers. So I'm gonna have some fun with you. Being an American, we have a lot of people on social media that think they can do everything. Like if they were put in the top guy spot, the general manager or list manager spot, they could do it. So I'm gonna have a little bit of fun here. For one day, I'm gonna install you as the list manager for the Richmond Footy Club. All 17 teams are completely open. You can bring in one player to add to Richmond's list to make them a chance to win a flag next year. Who's that one player and why?
Okay, that's a really tough one. I'm a massive fan of. I'm probably going to get canned for this, but I'm a massive fan of Sam Walsh from Carlton. Mm-hmm. He's a local boy, Ocean Grove boy, just across the bridge from us. I think he just oozes leadership. Terrific player. I think you can build a bit of a club around a player like that. I'm just looking what we probably need. We probably need another forward and probably another key back. Dylan Grimes is probably reaching the end. Robbie Tarrant, of course, probably only came over here to Richmond for a couple of years. I'd have someone maybe like a Harris Andrews from Brisbane, who I rate as a really good player. And as a forward, I'd love to prize Max from St Kilda. I think if we had him on the list next year, would be right up there. So they're probably the three. There'd be lots and lots of others as well. But if I put my list, I'd probably be a terrible list manager. But going by that, I'd say they're probably our needs.
Yeah, makes 100% sense. And again, it's just fun to think of. It's fun to think about, and it's
Oh,
definitely you can definitely go ahead.
Your boy Chad Warner as well.
He's a good one. He's a good one. I would definitely. My thing about Chad is the fact is that he's one of those that sometimes he can disappear a little bit. And I think Luke Parker has really kind of let him kind of be his type of player. I mean, when he gets the footy in hand, he's very strong. He's really good with the footy in hand and knows how to distribute it, but sometimes he can disappear a little bit. I think that's one of the things that the grand final hurt Sydney is that Geelong was getting first to the footy, and Chad Warner is really one of those when he can get that first handball and then use his speed out of the front of the pack, then I think then he's really, really effective. And that just really didn't happen in that grand final for sure. So he's a good one. All right.
He wasn't on his lonesome.
Yeah, no, he wasn't. There were a lot of swans that were off that day. There were.
He absolutely tore apart in that game at the MCG last year. At the SCG last year. Absolutely tore us apart. So he'd be another one that I'd be quite happy to have in the yellow sash.
Yeah, well, he's a good one for sure. Good WA boy for sure. All right, so I'm gonna ask this one, and I find this fascinating, especially with you being a Victorian. I'm interested to see how you answer this. Is it with, as you said, in 2020 the grand final was up in the Gabon. 2021 the grand final was out in WA. So it was very interesting to see the AFL grand final not at the MCG for 2 years, and I was thoroughly surprised when Victorian media started bringing up the topic of is there a possibility that the grand final could potentially become a traveling grand final? I know about the 50-year contract, so we're going to suspend that for just a second. As you as a Victorian, do you kind of like the idea potentially of it kind of shutting up interstate fans, saying, okay, it's not just a Vic bias? Or are you one of those that you kind of do have the tradition of it being at the MCG being something that you really would like to keep a hold of?
I love the fact that it's in Melbourne. 100,000 people, but I actually don't have a problem with it being a travelling grand final. I believe the more people that get to see the great game and get to see the pinnacle of the season, I think is all the more better. The stadium would have to hold. I mean, Optus Stadium has 60,000. Adelaide Oval, I think, is what, 50,
53, 54 maybe max. I mean, you could if you wanted to do it at Sydney, you could do it at a core, which I think is 70 or 80, which is the next biggest besides the MCG. But when it comes to just footy grounds, yeah, I mean, it would go MCG and then Optus was 60. So
that's at Homebush, yeah.
Yep.
I've been to a few NRL grand finals at Homebush, and it's look with a full house, it's okay. But I don't. The surface apparently is not crash hot. I don't have a problem with it. It's not going to happen because, as you said, the contract with the MCG. But I'm one of those Victorians that likes to keep both eyes open, and I don't have a huge problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all preference, and again, like I said, that contract is going to hand tie that. I don't think it's going to happen, but it was interesting. The Victorian media brought it up. It was not something I was expecting. So as we'll kind of go off what you said a little bit, is you like seeing people get to see footy a little bit, and this year the AFL decided, hey NRL, we like your idea of Magic Round, but we're going to call it Gather Round. We'll put aside whether what we think of the name. But South Australia gets to host all 9 games in one round this year in Gather Round. So I'm fascinated as a Victorian. What are your thoughts on Gather Round? And then do you have any thoughts of maybe slipping over to SA and catching a few footy games, since most of the 9 games are all going to be within traveling distance?
Um, from copying the NRL Magic Round, I actually don't mind it. I like the fact that they've made an allowance in the schedule to have an extra game for the season. So therefore, you still have 16 clubs still have 11 home games. Um, what it does is it gives Port Adelaide and Adelaide an extra home game. But yeah, that's that can't be avoided. I actually don't mind it. I've already bought a ticket to see our game against Sydney at the Adelaide Oval. I've not bought it. I got it for free with my membership.
Mhm.
I did look at accommodation a few weeks ago, and in the actual CBD, it's fairly sparse and quite expensive. So whether or not I go over, I don't know. I'd like to, but just depend on whether the logistics work out. But overall, I don't mind it. I think it'll be great viewing on TV to have all 9 games, and particularly with a few of those games at smaller stadiums like I think North
Norwood and
hosting a couple.
Glenelg, I think, are the
There's
two that I'm pretty sure of
there.
that they're going to be at.
Ah, okay. Because accommodation options in Glenelg are still quite. I probably letting the secret out. They're still quite. So yeah, I actually would like to go over. Normally like to go a couple of times a year to an interstate game. 2017, I went to every game, all away games, away there. I went to all 22 home and away games and all 3 finals. So I do like travelling interstate footy. So whether it means a drive over or fork out for a flight, yeah, I wouldn't mind standing up on the hill, uh, being at a Richmond Sydney game in Adelaide and sort of not having to deal with the Port and Crows ferals.
Yeah, it makes 100% sense. I love it. So if you do go, have a blast. So most people that listen to my channel and keep an eye on my channel know that I am a huge advocate for women's footy. I think women's footy is a huge growth opportunity for the AFL, and it's something I have fallen in love with. So I ask, do you keep an eye on the AFLW? And if so, have you kept an eye on your beloved Richmond Tigers, who I think are a team on the rise and a team that I have loved keeping an eye on over these last 2.5 seasons?
I do follow it. I think it's great. I probably didn't follow it too closely up until the start of last year. Now, I think that was due to the fact that Richmond weren't very good,
Mhm.
and watching games was a hard slog. But I watched every Richmond game this year, really invested, just enjoyed watching it. I have to confess, though, I don't watch too much of the other games. Um, I probably should, but at this stage, my interest in and it's probably very biased of me. My interest in other games probably just isn't quite there, and the standard probably isn't quite there yet for me to not watch a game unless I have a vested interest in it. That's no criticism of the girls at all. I think they're improving amazingly. I think the young girls that are getting drafted now have are going to be absolute stars. You can just tell by the way they move, their kicking action, their footy IQ. They've grown up with the game. Uh, players like for us, like Ellie McKenzie, just real good movers. So I'm fully supportive of the women's game. I watch Richmond games and get quite invested in it. It was disappointing. It was good to make finals, but it was disappointing to lose our two finals. But I think next year we've kept our core together, and I mean, how could you not love watching Monique Conti play? She's an absolute star. But probably my favourite player was Court Wakefield, and she's retired this year. So yeah, I follow it, fully supportive of it, and I'll try and watch more non-Richmond games this year.
Yeah, fantastic. I 100 Mon Conti is one of my favorites, but I think the three-headed monster you've got in midfield of Mon Conti, Grace Egan, and Ellie McKenzie are going to be fun to watch. They're young, they're talented, and they're very, very good. I think Richmond has got a great base. Yeah, I think it's sad to see Courtney Wakefield retire, but what a career that she has had. Absolutely fantastic. It's sad to see her go, but what a hell of a career. So we jump to it. I've told many people it is on my bucket list to get to Australia. I have never been there. I want to come see a game. So I'm doing a little bit of research to be sure when I go that I am ready. So I asked this as an American, we love our food at our sporting events. What's your go-to food when you go to the footy?
Uh, it's normally served from a tap into a cold glass. I don't eat at the footy. I haven't for a long time.
Mhm.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to afford a fairly high coterie membership, so I normally have a few beers, uh, and watch the game. Either going to out myself as being a bit of a snob here. Sometimes behind glass. Sometimes we'll go out into the seating area. But sorry to disappoint. I know my mate Craig, who I go with, he's a big fan of the hot dogs at the MCG.
Mhm.
He'll always get two hot dogs and smash into those. But I'll normally wait till after the game to have something to eat. Uh, so yeah,
Hey, there's nothing
just
wrong with
don't
that.
know.
You're not the first. In fact, I even had one fan say they're so nervous for the game they can't eat. They get like a soda pop or some kind of fizzy drink so then they can keep ease their stomach, but they're so nervous they can't eat. So you're not the first, not a problem at all. So if we go to the other one, I gotta find where's the best place to sit. When I go to the footy, where should I try to find a ticket to sit to watch the footy?
If you're going to a Sydney game at the SCG, I would suggest you could probably sit anywhere because it's mostly. I mean, you want to be with your own kind. You could probably sit anywhere there. If you went to a game, say at the MCG, I'd suggest if you could try and get somewhere closest to the wing, and not too high up. I mean, you'll pay for it, but sort of mid so you can see everything
Mhm.
unfold. Believe it or not, I think right up in the bleachers is not a bad spot either because you can see the whole field and you can see everything unfold, sometimes before it even happens. If you want crowd experience, see if you can sit somewhere near the cheer squad. Although I'm not a huge fan of cheer squads, but if you want the atmosphere, um, sit there. Although they're usually behind the goals, which doesn't offer the best view. So I would suggest if you can manage it, try and get somewhere on the wing, say on the second level, or at least high up on the first level, so you can see everything unfold.
All right. One of the most common answers. Absolutely love it. All righty. And then my favorite question that I ask, this is the last question that I ask for each of my interviews. And I love this because I'm finding some really great games out of this. What is your favorite game of footy you have ever seen? Live, on the telly, doesn't matter. What is your favorite game of footy you have ever seen?
I went to a game at the MCG, actually two games. Yeah, versus West Coast. Um, the first one was I can't remember what year. Brett Delidio was playing. I think it might have been his first game, or certainly one of his first games. Um, West Coast ended up winning by I think 4 points, but it was such an amazing game. West Coast had Cousins, Judd, and Kerr in the midfield, and it was one of those very few games where I was able to open that one eye that's usually closed, and just appreciate those three for the players they were. They single-handedly got them over the line, and it was during a period where we weren't great. Matthew Richardson kicked a goal late in the last to put us in front, which was amazing. But I left that game disappointed that we lost, but really happy that I'd made the effort to go and see a classic. And the other game was late in the season versus West Coast again. I think it was 2019, 18 or 19. The two, it might have been 18, because West Coast were very good that year too. MCG, we needed to win. They needed to win. West Coast got out to a 5-goal nothing lead early, and we just reeled them in. And it was just one of the best games you could ever want to see. It had everything. We won in the dying stages by I think it was like 6 points or something like that. But it was one of those games where you just take a deep breath at the end and go, "Gee, I'm glad I was here."
Awesome. That's fantastic. I love those stories. Definitely have to check that one out. So alrighty. That is going to do it for my chat, Justin. I really, really appreciate you coming on the episode and telling me some great stories. Absolutely fantastic. Genuinely appreciate it. So thank you for coming on the show today.
My pleasure, Donnie, and go Tides. If you're ever down here for a game, I'm sure you'll have a long list of people who are wanting to catch up with you and be with you at a game, or even if it's just for a beer or a soft drink beforehand, give us a bell.
Will do. Definitely will reach out. Genuinely appreciate the love and support that I get from so many Aussies when it comes to the game of footy. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode today. Keep an eye out. I still have more interviews coming out. VFL, Sandford Waffle, and obviously more AFL chats. We're gonna get to March. We're gonna get to the start of the footy season, and then we're gonna crack on to the footy season for sure. So that is going to do it for our episode. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be back with another episode very, very soon.